And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bashing us, fuck him.
Attention on deck. Good afternoon. Welcome to New York's finest retired and unfiltered network. We are the Executive Perspective. My name is retired Inspector Ron Leyson, and with me is my partner and co-host, retired Deputy Chief Rob LuKach. Good afternoon, Rob.
Good afternoon.
How's everything going?
Good. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing okay. Especially when you think about what the troubles that other people in the world are going through. And that's one of the things I want to start off with. There's a lot of people in the finest unfiltered family know about. It's been on social media a lot. Starting yesterday, it came out and it was spoken about on today's show with Eric and John. Eric Dim's son, Derek, has been battling for the last year serious brain tumor. He was out in Malaysia, living in Malaysia, training and competing in jiu-jitsu. Derek himself was training in competing in jiu-jitsu also, and started not feeling well, started getting some headaches. So they went and they got him checked out, and unfortunately found out that he had a stage 4 brain tumor. So they flew home, sold everything they had there, their home there. So flew home and started the process of finding the best treatment that they could for young Derek. And it's sad to say that, as heart-wrenching as it is to have to deal with this, that the culture of our country is that it's not only breaking your heart, but it's breaking the bank. And the expenses have been just astronomical in his treatment over the last year. A lot of the stuff, people think, hey, he's a retired NYPD, he's got great benefits, city benefits are great. Not always. Benefits, especially out of network and out of state, aren't covered. Treatment isn't covered. So Eric has been financially destroyed, actually. And as private as Eric is, I've known Eric for quite a few years. As private as Eric is, you would never have known, for all those who have watched over the last year, you never would have known what he was going through and his family was going through. He comes to the podcast every day in an upbeat manner, talks about everything. And now it's time for us to try and help him. So I want to give a shout out to Paul Manicone, Just Right PD, and his wife, Chrissy, for starting a GoFundMe for Eric and his family. The link is in our description for today's show. We're also going to put it in the comments that you can link on it. So we're hoping that you could find it in your heart for anything. Anything counts. Everything counts to donate to help Eric and Derek and his family in their cause, because this is just a horrible, horrible disease that's affecting an innocent 7-year-old child.
Ron, just knowing Eric, I mean, what a solid guy he is. A very, very excellent family man. Literally taking on this tragedy, bringing it together, holding the family together, doing a great job. My heart goes out to him and his son Derek. I mean, you just, as a parent, you just can't imagine the pain and suffering that they have. So, like you said, anything that you can give is greatly appreciated. And I know that Eric, being that the person that he is really, really appreciative of everybody that's already donated and anybody else with their future donations. I mean, he is just, I only met him maybe 2 or 3 months ago, and super impressive. Just a really funny guy, a happy guy, and I think whatever you can give, whatever you can do for him, he would really, really appreciate it. So let's all help Eric, and let's get him past this and get his son all better.
Yeah, and the response has been astronomical. It's been phenomenal. It's so appreciated. I know Eric is humbled by it. And also in Eric's statement, I don't know how he kept it together. I wouldn't have been able to keep it together to speak about it the way he spoke about it this morning on his show. But he understands that not everybody is in a place that they can financially donate. And if you can't financially donate, he just asks, and we ask for your prayers and your thoughts to go out to him, his family, and that they find some type of cure. And that's, it's a phenomenal amount that's been raised, and that looks like a ton of money, and it is a lot of money, but it really doesn't go very far. I know that Eric has gone through his retirement account to cover his expenses, his living expenses. They sold their home, the living expenses, the medical expenses, the treatment equipment to try and ease the pain, because the child's in extreme pain. So just if you can't physically donate money and you're not in that position, it's understandable. Everybody has their trials and tribulations, but please just send out your thoughts and your prayers to Eric and his family. So we appreciate everything that everybody does. A lot going on in law enforcement throughout the whole country right now. A lot of violence against police officers and law enforcement. Specifically, we had a couple of days ago a tragedy in Virginia Beach. 2 police officers, Christopher Reese and Cameron Gervin, were assassinated while executing a car stop.
Yeah, so Ron, I got Christopher Reeve and Cameron Gervin. They were on patrol when they spotted a blue Hyundai Sonata, and it just had an expired plate. They attempted to pull the vehicle over, but obviously the sedan refused to stop. So the officers and were able to eventually stop him, and it was in like a dead end area. And after stopping him, he was combative and he didn't want to get out of the vehicle. Eventually, he gets out and he charges them, and a little bit of a tussle. And then apparently, he pulls out a gun from his coat and shoots each police officer. Unfortunately, both officers go down. And then, in a barbaric, crazy way, he walks up to them and then basically assassinates them while they're laying on the ground.
Horrible.
One shot for each officer. Yeah, tragic. And then the coward that he was runs away and goes into a shed and, kills himself. Very tragic. And I'm no Monday morning quarterback, but I just want everybody to be safe. So I talk about tactics a little bit. I like, with the issue, we learned a lot of tactics. And I'm not saying they did anything wrong, because I wasn't there. I don't know how the transmission, how it transpired or whatever. But somebody's combative. Listen, call for backup, right? That's the first thing you do. I don't know how fast Virginia Beach, can get their backup there, but in the NYPD, right, you'll get backup like that. Call for backup. A lot of times I see highway guys, what they do is when they have a suspicious person and they doing a car stop, they'll back up. They'll give themselves 2 or 3 car lengths on the side of the highway. They'll be back far enough that they have enough time to react. And the other thing, just a suggestion, again, I'm not criticizing the Virginia Beach Police. All my heart goes out to them. But if you're writing a summons, don't be afraid to have your partners stay outside, so that a little bit of a tactical advantage, right? If that person gets out of the vehicle, at least one person's ready to go. So just, we know that no job is mundane, right? We know that don't get complacent, which we kind of all do, but you have to put back in your mind that you have to step forward and think about every job and give it the worst case scenario. You can always retract from that, right? But be prepared for the worst. So it just like a bit of tactics, and just be careful out there, because you never know what job. And I think, Ron, if I throw it back to you, there's another job, right, that you kind of think is a standard type of job, and look how that ended.
Yeah. Also on 223, Mississippi Deputy Sheriff Martin Shields Jr. was shot and killed while responding to a domestic violence job. And in the NYPD, we call this a closed job. To those who don't understand what that is, it's basically us escorting, the police escorting someone into a location where there's been prior domestic violence to make sure that they can get some clothing or any other essentials that they need in a safe manner. And as they approached the door, the perpetrator fired, striking and killing Deputy Sheriff Shields, and also shot his ex-wife and another woman at the scene. So again, as you said, no job is just routine. You know, this wasn't an ongoing domestic violence case. This wasn't a case of an assault in progress, anything like that. This was a closed job. I'm going to go there and I'm just going to help. I'm going to stand there, basically, you know, try to mediate, make sure nothing goes on. And tragedy strikes once again in the NYPD. And it's been going on for years and years. And, you know, we'll talk about, you know, what happened 37 years ago today. What happened 37 years ago today, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, another tragedy, right? Eddie Burns. He's sitting on a fixer post in front of a drug dealer's house, and he's literally, you know, I think it was about 11:30 at night, you know, 23:30 hours. He's sitting in the car. The individual comes up again, you know, just assassinates him, shoots him while he's sitting in the car, not even a chance to react. Literally, like, you know, 37 years ago in 1988, I was literally on the job maybe a year, you know, probably a little less, because I came on in 6 months in the academy, came on April of '87. So that really hit home. I'm thinking, wow, like that could be any of us, right? That could be any cop that, you know, they put you're a brand new cop. They're going to put you on that post, right? They're not going to put two senior guys and take them out of a sector and put you in a sector. You're going to be sitting on that post. So it really put a lot of light on the fact that, you know, this is a very hazardous job. Whether you're here, whether you're in a small department, it doesn't matter. You know, you put that uniform on, you're a police officer, and you're a target, right, for the bad guys. So you really have to be very, very careful. You always have to have, again, in the back of your mind, you know, watch everything. It's a very sad, you know, state of affairs. A rookie cop that gets killed like that, it brings to mind that all of us, how you have to make sure everything that you do is proper, and everything you do and look around and make sure that you're safe all the time. You just have to prepare yourself for the worst. And I'm not saying Eddie Burns did anything wrong. This savage came literally up and shot him, you know, while he's sitting in the car. So, you know, tragedy all around. And it was all gang related, right? So, you know, and I think something happened, you know, there's a city council hearing actually relative to gangs, and they're looking to eliminate something. And Ron, if you want to touch base, you know, on
the city council member Althea Stevens is sponsoring a bill to delete the gang crew database that the NYPD has, and it was talked about at length today. It was the main topic of John and Eric's show. And we just thought it was important enough to mention on our show that it's been proven that the gang database has not been used to target any individuals. It's used for intelligence. It's used for deployment. And what I mean by that, for those who didn't see the show this morning, I'll explain. So if someone is identified as a gang member, and they also have made it a lot more difficult to put them in the database, they have to be self-identified, they have to be arrested with associates, and or have their own social media posts as gang members. So not everybody's put in the gang members, but in the gang database. But the importance of having these individuals that are associated with gangs and crews in the database is that it gives us information. I'll give you just an example, not a specific example, a general example. I was Housing Borough Bronx Queens commanding officer. In the PSA 7, there were several different developments. Anybody that's ever worked around housing knows that each development is its own world, and a lot of times the crews and the gangs are very specific to different developments. So if you have somebody in Patterson houses that's shot and they're a gang member in the gang database, that's how you would know that they're a gang member from a gang database. You would know who their rival gang was and therefore deploy to that rival gang area to try to prevent retaliation from the victim's fellow gang members, because they're not going to stand around and wait for him to get put into the ambulance and go to the hospital with him and like a family member. They're gang members. They're going to go and retaliate against those who they believe brought the violence into their community. And that's one of the most important things. It just, you use that to save lives. And what one thing that she was harping on was, oh, give me a quantify the amount of lives that was saved from this database. And you cannot, and she knows that's an impossible question. You cannot quantify the amount of lives that are saved by doing things like that, by deploying properly. In the past, when somebody was shot, we had a 72-hour shooting plan. What did that mean? We flooded the area where the person was shot for 72 hours to prevent further violence. But we've learned through intelligence and experience that that's not where the violence is going to continue. You're not going to have another shooting, another stabbing there for the most part. What's going to happen is you're going to have a retaliatory. So your immediate deployment, and it was always where, as patrol was taking care of the shooting at that scene, anti-crime and your other specialty units would go to where the rivals were. So to go off and say that it has no bearing and that other methods work, because this is one piece of the puzzle. This is one piece of the puzzle. It's what Chief LuKach was saying and what the department agency attorney was saying, is that this is one piece of the puzzle. This isn't the puzzle. It's one piece of the puzzle. And then to make it, try to throw the racial twist on it, because 96%, statistics show 96% of shooters and shooting victims are people of color. And 99%, because he corrected her, because she said 96, he corrected her to 99% of the people in the gang database are people of color. But again, it's because they're self-identified. It's not racially profiling. It's used for intelligence only. It's not accessible to anyone outside the NYPD. Nobody will ever find out about it from a job interview or anything else.
You know that you also made a point that most of the guys that are in the database, some of them are self-reported, right? They don't want to be in the gang anymore. They want to literally get out of the gang. So I mean, it also helps them. But Donovan Richards, years ago I went to a meeting relative to emotionally disturbed people. Susan Herman was there when she was the Deputy Commissioner of Collaborative Policing. And we were talking about that, and all Donovan Richards wanted to bring up was the gang database. That was the goal, just to get rid of it. And I don't think the city council really understands the importance of it. And like you said, you can't quantify the prevention that's happened. So knowing the gangs that go against the other gang, then you can easily say, we know where the shooter is. We know where to go. We know what gang he's in. So you're not going to flood, like you just said, he's not going to flood the area where the shooting was. We're going to go where that other gang hangs out so that we can identify the people there. We can identify the shooter. So in other words, to get rid of this database is really ridiculous, because it leads, like you said, to proper investigations, and it's a tool. It's not a problem later on in life. They expunge records after 3 years for adults, after 2 years for juveniles. So if you're in that database and you have no other criminal history, no other acts of violence, you're literally taken out of there. So why wouldn't you want that database? Listen, if they use particular criteria, like you just mentioned, to be put into that database. So it's really a tool, and to take a tool away from somebody for the reason of race is the only reason their argument is it doesn't work. It's not good. It's the police
Yeah.
department needs every tool that they have, you know. So I mean, to remove something like that, it just doesn't make sense to us, especially with the ones that observe it. And you know, just it's going to hurt. I would wish the citizens of New York would stand up too and say, no, it's if we understand, right? Because there was a Department of Investigation. They did a whole
Right.
investigation on it. So if the citizens know the rules and how hard it is to get into the database, the criterias, and then knowing that they'll get out of the database, then it's fine, right? Then I would understand. Even if my son was associated with a gang and I told him, listen, schmucko, for the next 3 years, you're gonna behave yourself and stay away from the gang and not have any violence, and then you're gonna be taken out of that. That's what I would want. I would want to know that my son is in there, you know. So, but
Well,
I mean,
you wouldn't know. Honestly, you wouldn't know because it's not public. It's not
right,
public like the 50A and the NYPD gang database, right? Talk about that, but we won't. You know, it's just a comparison. So that's okay. That database is okay to be public forever, but yet someone that's in a gang where we could use the intelligence to do that, to do this deployment, to also, you know, again, we're just touching on it as a quick overview. Please go back and watch John and Eric's show from today. They got into it very deep. They played the city council hearings. There was back and forths with council member Stevens, but also with Jumani Williams, who got very confrontational with Chief LePetri.
yeah. Ron, if you bring up Pat Donahue, makes a pretty good,
Yeah,
valid point to
yeah, I was
exactly
gonna
what you're
hit that.
speaking to. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Patrick Donahue. And I saw your first comment, Patrick. Don't worry about it. I didn't miss it. The hearing at City Hall was nothing but a soapbox platform for Jumani Williams and Athea to posture for political street cred. And again, go back and watch John and Eric's show because it's just proven they asked questions, number one, that couldn't be answered. And when an answer was when they tried to give an answer, they were cut off and said, we don't have the time. I'm just repeating what you said and trying to take things out of context and not give and allow the NYPD to formulate a response and give anecdotal responses since you can't give quantitative responses.
I think Simply E hits it right there too. It's not going to happen till later on, right? When they see the results of removing the database, you know, years from now, when gang violence is out of control, and right away they're going to go, why is the NYPD not doing anything to control the gang violence? And you know, if you don't know the players, it becomes a harder investigation, right? And I think the city, when some members from the NYPD even brought up, you know, actually Robert Holden brought it up. There's new gangs coming in because of the illegal immigrants. So
Yeah,
they're not even, there's no
Lager.
record of them. So unless they look at social media and they get confirmation from 2 other people, then they put them in the gang database. But here we have violent gangs that aren't even really, you know, they're not citizens. So I mean, how can you say that this database does anything but prevent crime and help the citizens of New York City?
They can't. They could not come up with any reason other than trying to say that it's racial profiling and trying to use the data that the NYPD was providing on victims, shooters, and people in the database. We weren't hiding the numbers. They weren't hiding the numbers. They're telling you straight facts. Straight facts are, unfortunately, that the Black and brown community are the ones that are, number one, committing the violence, and number two, the victims of the violence.
Right.
So, I mean, we're like 25 minutes in, but I think there's one more thing that's really important. Is there anything else on that? I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
Not on that. No, I'm ready for you.
Yeah, I think one more thing came out today that was really important, is related to the NYPD. Commissioner Tisch made a couple of changes, one in the recruitment efforts and one also in the training methods. In the recruitment effort, they are going to lower the college requirement from 60 college credits to 24 college credits. And the second thing was they're reinstating the mile-and-a-half run. Now, I know when the mile-and-a-half run was taken out, under Chief Holmes, when she was the chief of training, there was a lot of uproar about that and the physical standards, and maybe taken out of context, where people were saying, well, no cop is going to have to run for 1.5 miles. And that's not the point. It's a matter of getting your cardiovascular up, being in shape, being able to affect an apprehension or get involved with some type of physical altercation at a moment's notice.
So I mean, I'm just being sarcastic here, but so we want dumber cops, but we want them faster. So
I'm going to push back on that one, Rob.
I
I don't think.
listen.
I don't.
Go
ahead.
I'll talk. Some of it I agree with you that the college credits doesn't make a person, but what a couple years of college does for a person, it gives them the understanding of academics. It gives them the understanding of maturity. It gives them a couple extra years. Well, they're going to college. Some of them, whether it's a community college or whether it's a college away, they're by themselves. They have to study on their own. I mean, it's a different dynamic than high school, right? I mean, you literally there's presentations you have to do. So public speaking. There's a lot of things that in college, and not necessarily the first or second year, but you get that ball rolling. You may have 1 or 2 projects. You may be working collaboratively with a group. So I mean, there's group dynamics. There's a lot of things that college does provide that can make you a better officer than high school. Now, listen, I came on in 1987 with just a high school degree. They didn't tell me I needed anything. I could raise to the rank of captain with a high school degree. Well, then they threw, the monkey wrench in when I was studying for sergeant. Then all of a sudden they said, oh, you need 64 credits for a sergeant, then you need 96 for a lieutenant, and then you need a bachelor's degree for a captain. So most of my education was done while I was on the job. So, but
well, yeah, go ahead.
And I was just going to say, for them to lower the standards at this time, I question their motive. And you and I both know their motive is to get more applicants. And
absolutely,
are we low? And when you do that, are you lowering the standard? I mean, I know there's other cities, and there's other, even out in Nassau and Suffolk, where there's no educational requirement at all. But I'll go with a whole different pattern, and I'm going to throw it back to you right now. I'll go a whole different pattern. That's a different job, and I'll talk about that after you want to rebuttal my my talk.
Yeah, I'm gonna push back from a lot of different experiences that I've had on this job and in life. And I don't. I know you were being sarcastic by saying we're going to dumb it down, but make them more physically fit, because just because you have 24 college credits, instead of 60, doesn't make you dumber. Because I don't agree that college is going to prepare you well for the NYPD.
Mm-hmm.
The NYPD is a dynamic job. I think that you have a better opportunity, a better chance of being a better officer with life experience, consistent work experience, than you do with just an academic background. It's not academia in certain professions, absolutely prepares you for that profession. I don't think that academia can prepare you for a life in law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you got on this job with a high school diploma, and you did exceptional in your career. You rose all the way up to the rank of a deputy chief, which is in like the top 0.01% of the NYPD. And you did that with a high school diploma to get on the job, and then as you rose up, or as you were on the job, you wound up getting your college, your college degree.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you did that out of desire, or if you did that like myself and did it just out of necessity because you needed a diploma you needed 64 credits to be a sergeant, you needed 76 credits to be a lieutenant, you needed a bachelor's degree to be a captain. I got on this job with a GED. And I only got a GED at the age of 25, just before I got on the job. And I talked about this in my interview with John and Eric. I only got my GED just before I got appointed in 1993. and I was 26 when I got appointed, so I was 25 when I got my GED. And again, I got my GED to get on this job because at the time I was teaching an EMT course, and I was actually an EMT on an ambulance for 911 in Staten Island. So I was working, I was doing well, but I wanted to be an NYPD cop, so I had to get my high school diploma, my GED. I do not agree that academia prepares you for a life in the NYPD. I am on the fence on the maturity aspect, where I can see, I can understand there's a lot of people that have to become independent, more so if you're dorming out or you go away to college. You become more independent, and you have to learn to do things more on your own, and independent thinking, and being able to care for yourself and care for other people around you. But I'm not convinced that academia is going to prepare you for a life in the NYPD. I personally believe, and when I was the executive officer of Candidate Assessment Division, it's something that I actually tried to implement again, was to drop the college requirement to help with recruitment. And what I suggested was, in lieu of the college requirement, we should have work experience credit. Just like you have 2 years of military experience in lieu of college. If you didn't go to college and you went into the military, you did 2 years of active service in the military, and you left the military in good standing with an honorable discharge, that negates the 60 college credit requirement. I had suggested some type of work experience credit, because I'm in agreement with Patrick that I've found the candidates that have never worked, that lived at home with mom and dad, went to college, even if they went away to college, didn't make the best candidates. Their maturity level, I found, was sometimes they were immature, more immature than those who went to college, worked full time, learned the responsibilities of going and working, as opposed to going to college and partying, which a lot of guys do. A lot of people do. They go to, and part of it is partying. And a lot of the candidates had trouble coming through candidate assessment when they were out dorming, because they would, have alcohol related issues because they're partying and everything else. So they're not, so there's pros and cons with that. But I'm not convinced that I believe if you want to have some sort of requirement other than the college credits, make sure that they have some type, whether it be 2 years of positive work experience, that's documented work experience, that could supplement for the college requirement, because you're learning about responsibility, you're learning about working, and dealing with people and the public for the most part when you're working, because most jobs, people in some way, shape, or form are dealing with the public. They're not all, sitting at a desk, especially when you're younger. And so you're getting that experience of dealing with the public. So how do you
No,
feel about my points?
I agree with you. I think Marlon makes a great point also. A lot of the people that go to college really don't learn anything. I think it was somebody said, I think it was Reed maybe said about, what do they go to college and they get basket weaving or some degree in some
Sure.
craziness. He said woodcraft, right? So really, what does it matter, right? Because it does. And I think with the candidate assessment, all right, we remove the credits. I'll give you that, but do a qualified assessment of them, because if somebody has a job and that job really is not relevant to any type of interaction with anybody else, it's just, it could be you could say I have a job, but if I'm
Yeah.
using a forklift and just taking stuff off the Home Depot truck every day, I don't have any interaction. So you have to have, a little bit of knowledge and understanding too about how to interact with people. So I mean, I think
Right.
there's multi things that can be brought into it.
Agreed to a point, but when you're working, you're learning the responsibility of having to get up every day, go to work, get tasks assigned to you that need to be completed in a positive way, otherwise you're not going to keep your job, especially in the private sector. If you don't do your job, you're going to get terminated. Then you're going to have negative. Then you'll have negative or what we used to call derogatory information in your work history. So if you go and you have positive work for a period, and again, I don't even know that that's even a requirement, but if you want to make it a requirement, have positive work experience. And again, it doesn't have to be, because the truth in my eyes is that you go to the police academy. So even if you go to John Jay, I don't think that prepares you 100% to be a police officer, and you're being taught by a ton of retired cops, right, of all ranks. But I believe that you go to the police academy. That's when you start to learn about being a cop, right? But that gives you a minimal foundation. 6 months gives you a minimal foundation of law and the patrol guide, tactics, some physical fitness, and how to drive a police car. That's what you learn at the police academy, right? So you're getting your baseline basics of how to be a police officer. Where do you really learn the job, Rob?
Well, I think once you're out of the police academy,
right? the day you show up at your command, you start learning how to be a cop. You start learning how to be a cop. It's the same thing with the fire department, right? Take the fire department. It's the same thing. If you go to college, because they have a 60 credit requirement. I don't know if they're going to lower theirs to 24. They don't have a recruitment problem. They never have, right? But the fire department requires 60 college credits or 2 years of military. I believe 2 years of military. I think it should be the same. How is that preparing you to be a firefighter? You're going to the firefighter academy, and you could speak to this better than me because you were a firefighter prior to getting on the job in New Jersey. So going to college isn't going to prepare you to be a firefighter. You're going to learn how to be a firefighter at the fire academy. And then more importantly, when you're a probie, right? Where are you as a probie? You're attached at the hip to that fire officer, learning the job as you go along. That's how you learn the job. That's where you learn the job. So I don't think that college is preparing you for the NYPD. Therefore, I don't think that requirement is necessary. I'm not saying there shouldn't be something. I agree with Patrick, what he said earlier, that I found it problematic when you had people that lived at home with mom and dad, didn't have a care in the world, didn't pay for a thing on their own, never had a job, went to college, and then boom, now I'm an NYPD cop. And I always said that, but I saw it firsthand in so many places that I worked. I saw it the most. I was the XO and the impact commander in PSA 2 in Brownsville, Brooklyn, right? So now you got these kids coming from 23 years old, 22 years old, coming from Long Island, never had a job, went to college, got their college degree or their credits, whatever the case may be, never had a real job. And now they're in the middle of Brownsville and they're responding to a job trying to mitigate a family dispute for families that have grown up and dealt with domestic violence, alcoholism, drug abuse, other types of violence. And you're going to walk in there and try and mitigate these things. How did college prepare you for that? You know?
I'll say two things real
Sure.
quick. With the FDNY, they can put 60 college credits there. They could probably put 120 credits. Everybody wants that job. It's a great job, right? You go to work, everybody is unity in the firehouse. Everybody's great. You respond as a team. The public loves you. There's no hatred, right?
Right.
Firemen are loved by everybody, and rightfully so. That they go out there and then they battle these fires and they save people. That's what they do, and that's great. But what I'm saying with the NYPD is the problem isn't the college credits. That's not the reason why recruitment's down. We know the diaphragm law, right? Bail reform, 50A. Okay, those are the problems. If Jessica Tish, and I also want to shout out to Jessica Tish today. I normally wouldn't, but she did promote somebody from the issue that I'm very, very fond of. Terry Advet, great guy. Took a bullet. I hope he was in line to get promoted already, and it didn't take a bullet to get promoted. But
come on.
Unfortunately, yeah. But so that's the problem. You can you can, what they say, you can put lipstick on a pig. You know what? It's still a pig. Fix the problem. Okay.
Agreed.
Because
There are
she's going after the wrong things. And I know she probably, maybe she doesn't have the things. This was something that Adams wanted to do back in 2022 after he came back from Chicago. You know, he got this brainstorm, but that's not the recruitment problem, in my opinion. And yes, you will open the door for potentially other people, but let's say you get, I read something where there's 5,000 potential candidates that will now be eligible because there's no more college requirement. Ron, you know how many people out of 5,000, how many people am I getting? 1 out of 10, right? Usually, isn't that the factor?
Well, that's the way it used to be.
Okay. Well,
I'm not going to say that that's the way it is today.
Did they dumb down the investigations to get more people?
I'm not going to say no.
That's the other problem.
That's a whole nother rabbit
I know,
hole to
that
go
could be
down.
a whole nother podcast. But
yeah, it used to be half the people that took the test and passed the test didn't even process, didn't want to process. So then out of that other 50%, 1 out of 10 would actually get the job. So you're talking about if there were 5,000 additional viable candidates, the only way that they would know that was that the candidates answered the CAS-5, which is the initial packet that's sent out once the list is promulgated from DCAS. So they send out this packet, they send you an email, you fill it out with the initial information and send it back to you. That's the only way that they would know that they had a viable candidate from the get-go. Because, like I said, the problem is half the people that used to take the tests didn't even respond to that and fill out the thing. So if she's saying she had 5,000 people that filled out the CAS-5 but didn't have enough college credits and wasn't going to have enough college credits by the time the class was being put in, which right now is they're processing people in months instead of years.
right.
So it's next to impossible. If you're not finishing up a semester and going to have your college credits, you're not getting into the next class. You're not even going to be processed. You're going to be put on hold. But
Well, I like what did I cut you off? Go ahead, Ron.
No, I'm just saying that it makes the pool larger. It also opens it up to some people that either got, dropped out of college because college wasn't for them. And so now, they can't become, because a lot of times you had people that applied for the NYPD and they were guided through to how to get FEMA credits, take FEMA courses to get FEMA credits, Empire State College, online colleges. A lot of colleges do online courses now after the pandemic, but it used to not be the case. There was only a few colleges that were accredited that would do online colleges. And we would guide them to try and help them to get these credits, lowering the requirement. And again, now these guys and gals were just getting these credits just so they can get on the job. So they were taking FEMA courses and they would get 10 credits. They get life credits. You remember, you go to these colleges, you write
Empire State,
an essay,
right?
Yeah, you write an essay and you can get up to X amount of credits just for your life experience. So
I just like the fact that it gives a little bit more life experience. I'm not saying that it makes a better person. I think maybe the evaluation process should just be a little better. That, like you said, they can take life experience, instead of having to go to a college and give me credits for life experience, that life experience can be evaluated by somebody in candidate assessment and said, yeah, I'm a good candidate. A lot of people, they speak about, the former chiefs of staff, Raul Pintos, chief of detectives, Richie Nicastro, no college. And back then you didn't need it, right? I question as to why did they put it in place then? If individuals like this made 3-star chiefs, went all the way up, came on the job without any college and were forced to do college, and like you said, probably not even really substantial college. It was just doing an essay and getting 3 credits or 4 credits for it. Basically that was just paying money. You're literally paying money to get college credits, because you could write a 4-page report and you get 4 credits. So I question as to why would the NYPD even implement that originally? What was the original goal to do that? And is it because we had an influx of candidates, or that there was certain candidates, more candidates had a degree and others didn't? I don't know. Was it people in the suburbs, that out in Nassau and Suffolk, Orange, Rockland, Westchester, Dutchess, did they not go to college? And did the people in the city go to college? I don't know the answer. I don't know.
I think Marlon makes a very strong point, that's a larger conversation about society, where we
All right.
were, where we are. So, you have anything else on that? We're 45 minutes in. We're
No, no,
45 minutes into our quick intro.
I just think it was important because it came up
Absolutely.
today, and and
Absolutely.
the thing is, we whether you're gone or not, you still have a care for it, and you want to see that, make
Sure.
sure things that continue properly. And sometimes I don't necessarily know that it is, but no, I'm good with that. Sorry for the 45 minutes of
No.
non-evaluation talk. So
No, well, I think let's get into that. Performance evaluations. Are they fair, or is it favoritism?
mm,
That's the topic, of today's thing, and it's
yeah.
always been a debate. It's always been a conversation that, oh, it's a popularity contest, that the sergeants don't evaluate their subordinates in a fair and equitable manner. Same thing with lieutenants, to the sergeants, and so forth. So, what are your initial thoughts on that?
So I mean, years ago, right, there was a reevaluation of the evaluation system, right? So I think when in one of in the civil service paper, the chief, they specifically talk about revamping the process of evaluation, making sure that things are done properly, reevaluating things. Most things were done based on numbers, right? So it was always, that we want the number. And then eventually it got down to, Police Commissioner O'Neill, when they developed the whole different thing by putting stuff in the hands of the police officers, the police databases right in their palms. They ended up developing craft that allows a person to, give notations about individuals, and that notation can be self-generated. It could be your partner generated. It could be a supervisor that works in your command, and it could also be an outside supervisor. So I think you have an example of one, right, Ron, where you were actually observed a couple police officers and you were able to give them a positive craft.
Oh yeah. I was actually on my way into work into the Bronx, and I was going down Third Avenue, and I saw somebody that was obviously suffering from a heroin episode. They were standing upright but leaning completely over. For those in the NYPD, unfortunately, you've seen that look too often. And when I drive to work and I'm driving through communities in my police car, I always make sure I have the division radio on. God forbid something happens, I'm not fumbling to turn the radio on. I have the radio on, whatever radio division I'm driving through. And I knew there was no calls for service for this individual. And I saw a 4-row precinct car a little ahead of me. And I said, oh, let's see if this guy's stopped, And sure enough, they stopped. They pulled over. That they got out. They offered him assistance. They called for an ambulance. I watched how they handled. I sat back and I just watched how they handled the job, and I thought they did a very professional job. And like I said, I know they had it as what we call a pickup. It wasn't a 911 job, and I thought that was excellent. So I waited around. I waited till after the individual was placed in the ambulance, who didn't want to go, obviously, but EMS gave him Narcan, woke him up a little bit, which agitated him, and then put him on the bus and on the ambulance and took him to the hospital. So then I pulled up, identified myself because I wasn't in uniform, because like I said, I was on my way into work. And I asked them for their phones so I could give them what's called a scratch, where I inspected them, but also for their tax numbers so I can give them a positive craft, because I thought they did a good job. They're out there. They took a personal initiative. They could have kept driving, pretended, put the blinders on, kept driving, because unfortunately in that community, you know, there's several areas around there where you do see a lot of, you know, heroin use, and people, unfortunately, in that condition. So you can get numb to it if you allow yourself to. But these officers
Mhm.
did a good job, and they went and they deserved, in my eyes, a positive craft.
Okay,
Not the
that's
first time
good.
that I gave, not the first time that I gave positive crafts. You know, listen, I've always said, you know, as supervisors, we're very quick to criticize. We have to be even quicker to praise when cops do, or anybody does a good job. And that's this. So this whole policy and this whole procedure, and it's extensive. I mean, it's been a long time since I've, you know, read and studied for a promotional exam or anything like that. When you're reading through all these policies and procedures, and a lot of times you'll do a quick reference if you're involved in something. Like if I was doing an evaluation appeal, I would look up the appeal process to make sure I was following the steps properly and whatnot. And preparing for this with you, you know, we looked it over. There's a lot of different procedures, 4 or
Yeah,
5
no.
pages long, very in depth. There's there's a very detailed, sometimes somewhat too detailed sometimes, but a very detailed process in which you're supposed to follow. And if followed properly, it's a fair system. Problem being, we'll go to Patrick Donahue again. Great comments today, Patrick. Appreciate you always being with us and supporting. I would say over 75% of the job evals are not accurately or honest. I guess not done accurately or honestly. Favoritism, maintaining the bell curve. I can't agree with you more. If you go to go down to page 405, paragraph 6, Jack, if you could, in 33101. So
I also think, you know,
in,
them by,
in
by, by
yeah,
revamping it, they, you know, they obviously knew there was a problem with it. So trying to
oh,
revamp the whole
absolutely.
system, and did they really correct anything, or did they make it more complicated? You know, with the quarterlies and the yearlies. I mean, does it become more complex? Does it put more burden on the supervisors? So
Absolutely puts more burden on the supervisors, because now they have to do not just the monthly report that they used to have to do, where the cops would do their monthly report and then they would just sign, you know, they would sign the back or whatever. Now there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more to it where they have to give points. They have to evaluate certain things. They have to look at the officer profile report. But I just wanted to just point out one thing that's very important with the whole process. I thought when I read over the policy again, one thing really stuck out. Members of the service are reminded that appraisals of subordinates' performance is a continuous process. The use of an annual evaluation system does not relieve the supervisors of their responsibility to monitor and document subordinates' performance throughout the rating period. The evaluations due webpage provides a roster of annual and probationary performance evaluations that are due for specific personnel. But the key point there, you have to evaluate as you go along. Too many times at the end of the year, they do an evaluation, and because of this policy, they change it to these quarterly evaluations. But it's always been, not always, but a vast majority of supervisors would write these evaluations, and it would be the first time that a cop is hearing if they weren't doing a great job, instead of getting feedback as they were not doing something. If their performance wasn't up to par, it's the supervisor's responsibility to identify it and correct it and give guidance on how to improve it as you go along. Don't wait until the end and then say, "Hey, you suck." You know, I hated that. I always hated that, and was very strict with my supervisors on how not to do that. And I think when you get into uh, this whole process, it again, like you said, it's daunting. There's a lot to it. What do you find the most troubling or the most difficult part of the process?
well, I'm a big advocate of giving the supervisors appropriate amount of time to fill it out. Because
Absolutely.
if they don't have it, right, then they rush through it. I think somebody said earlier, I forget who made the comment, but they're just checking boxes. Why?
Yeah,
Because
Mikey
they
G.
want you to get through them all so they can clear the queue, as we say, and those are no longer registered downtown as open evaluations or overdue evaluations, and the boss isn't busting your balls because, hey, you have 10 guys in your squad that you didn't do evaluations, you better start doing them. So what do? You rush through them. And then when you rush through
Copy
them,
and paste. Copy and paste.
copy and paste and whatever. And then you end up telling the cop or the sergeant or the lieutenant, however the evaluation's going down, hey, I need you to go in today and just sign off on this thing so I get it off my plate. And that's not fair, right? Because you're supposed to sit down with the person, you're supposed to talk to them, educate them, lead them in the right direction, maybe even giving them positive reinforcement if they're doing a really good job. But what happens, everybody else is just pushing stuff, pushing it off the plate. I just got to get rid of it. So now that, I don't want to get into a whole nother area, but if you don't have the proper amount of supervision, sergeants, lieutenants that are there to complete that task and then still backfill patrol, right? So if I need an administrative day as a sergeant and there's only 2 of us working, guess what? It's not an administrative day, right? I'm either on patrol or I'm on the desk. So that goes by the wayside. So you have to set those standards in also so that they can appropriately evaluate. And then I don't care what evaluation system there is, if you give the person the time and the ability to do it, then I think they can do it right. But I think it's just a rush to get it done. The other thing somebody mentioned is that I think it was Pat Donahue, the bell curve, right? At a certain point, I remember them telling us that a certain amount of percent of your squad had to meet standards. Then you could have 1 or 2 up here that are, above standards. And then right here is well above. You had to maintain that curve.
Banding.
Yeah.
We had to
and
put
what
them in
happens?
bands.
That's ridiculous. What happens if I have a really good squad? I can't give a reward to everybody that's working really hard for me.
Right.
So there's a lot of, and what I would consider injustice within this system. It doesn't allow it. There's too many restrictions. And like I said, there's restrictions on the person. So you asked me what my beef was, the restrictions on the supervisor doing the evaluation and the restrictions relative to the evaluation and where you're getting the, I could just real quick go into one more thing. If that information gets on your phone, it tells you, okay, we have an accident prone location, we have a robbery pattern, we have a burglary pattern, and you go there and maybe you do a vertical, maybe you do this. If you don't self-craft, they're not going to know about it, right? Because they're going to say, well, what are you doing all day? You didn't write any summonses over here on the accident prone location. Oh, but I was there for 2 hours and there was no accidents because I was there. So how do you do that? So you got to do a positive craft, right? So now you're self-generating, right? I could see where I would be in a radio. If me and you were in a radio car, Ron, what I would do is, Ron, you just made a really good left turn, craft. Rob, you just wrote a good report, craft. I'd be crafting the hell out of everything.
It's like craft cheese, man. It's everywhere.
It would.
But yeah, you bring up good points, and it has to do with a lot because they're asking. Manpower is low, as we know, with the mass exodus because of everything that's going on, and the ability to do all these things that are required. Look at the body-worn camera reviews and everything else. We could go down many different avenues and talk about that. They don't give you enough time to properly do your administrative duties. 100%. There has to be something's got to give with that. I agree with you 1,000%. And one of the things you started bringing up was the officer profile report in 33109. So let me bring that up. The officer profile report. The officer profile report, right? I personally wasn't that familiar with this because it wasn't in effect when I was a commanding officer of the 2 precincts. But it's an officer profile report. You touched on it when you said about the phone and you'll be able to
Right.
look and see about the 911 calls and whatnot. It's an electronic form that is generated in the performance evaluation system that compiles data from numerous department databases to provide an accurate account of uniform members' performance. It will include statistical data, 7 majors, top 911 locations, top collision locations, etc. It also, I believe, it tells you how many radio runs you did, but it also tells you what the officer did about it in regards to, and again, to your point, activity. Unique to the
Right.
precinct. Here's a big thing, though. It's unique to the precinct and platoon to which the reporting member is assigned. In addition, the officer profile report will contain information from officers' self-reporting forms, self-craft, and supervisor feedback forms, which is also craft. So it's going to have the craft information in there, and it's going to have the supervisor's crafts. From what I'm getting from the people that I've spoken to, people aren't self-crafting anymore. They were in the beginning. They were pushed to do it. The supervisors are never, to my knowledge, were really big on doing crafts. So it's that right there, I think, is a great tool. But I guarantee you it's not being used properly. I guarantee, first of all, they're looking at it at the end of the month. So it's reactive as opposed to proactive. So again, like I spoke about with the performance objectives and quotas when we talked last week, if you're giving performance objectives, you have to arm the cops with the boots on the ground, the supervisors with the boots on the ground, the platoon commanders that are leading their platoons with the knowledge ahead of time, whether that's from your crime analysis team and them giving the information on a real-time basis, weekly, daily, if something big is going on, and getting it down to the boots on the ground with direction on how to address these conditions. Again, not saying, okay, we have this condition, this prone, this collision prone location. So I want, like that captain said, I want 5 summons of this and 5 summons of that and 5. Absolutely inappropriate and wrong, and a quota. 100% I agree. And some people had said to me that, oh, Ron, you said there's no such thing as quotas. I never said there was no such thing as quotas. I said there's no NYPD systematic policy of quotas, but quotas are absolutely enforced by inadequate leaders and inadequate supervisors that don't know how to properly execute giving cops performance objectives by arming them with the knowledge. Now, this officer profile report is arming the cops with the knowledge of what's going on their platoon in their command. Okay? So I think that that's a great tool. That's one way for the cops to have, have access to what's going on. But again, there's other parts of the procedure, and I wasn't sure if you were going into it or.
I was just, I just want to talk about, because you brought up 33109, and I just wanted to bring up 3C, because it talks about proactive and quality activity. So yeah, okay, you could say that's performance indicators, but there's also a point where you do a comparison to what other officers did.
Yes.
Compare members' current monthly performance to other members with similar duties. I mean,
Right.
now, are we pitting cops against cops there? Well, I mean, it's ridiculous that, because somebody else. What happens if when I'm an XO and I need a traffic safety, and I take a couple guys out from the precinct, the regular platoon, and I say we're going to go do a checkpoint, and the guy gets 10 summonses. Now you're going to take the squad sergeant's going to take that 10 summonses and compare it to the rest of the squad. I mean, it's not a fair assessment there. So I just think that, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but I think that we start talking about quotas and numbers and everything else, and I just think that's not fair. A fair evaluation. I give a lot of great comments, in the chat.
Yeah.
Mikey G63. Sometimes you get to work, and the XO or CO would want you to do an evaluations for someone whose supervisor was on vacation. I've never once supervised that cop. And they also want it done ASAP, right? So true. So true. How all of us that have been in supervisory positions deal with that. It's like, that's insanity.
Or
How
you
do you
just took
do
over
that?
the squad. You just took over
Yeah.
the squad, and you don't know
And
these
the other
people.
guy's
You're a
gone. You
brand,
can't even get in touch.
the other guy's gone. You're a brand new sergeant. You're not even a senior sergeant, and you got to
No.
walk in and you got to do evaluations. But what I
Yeah.
always did with that, in that scenario, what I always did was I would have the platoon commander assign another platoon sergeant that is familiar, because even though it's not your squad, you're still working with them 2 or 3 days a week, so you know who's who and whatnot. And you're supposed to, you're supposed to have a conferral with the prior supervisor. I
Yeah.
don't know how many people really do that. I mean, come
Yeah.
on,
Forget that. That
that's
guy's
what you're
gone.
supposed to do.
He's not taking
Again,
your calls, or she.
yeah, like they're good guys. They're all good guys. They're all good guys. They're all 5.0s, 5.0s. But I think that's an important
But
point.
so
We talk about 5.0s. Talking about 5.0s. I know when we were talking about this offline, there's a portion of this where if the officer or the ratee gets either a 5.0 or a 2.5 or
just
below.
interject though, real quick, Ron. First of all, that was good of you as CO to do that. I have to compliment you, because at least you took the bull by the horns when you did that, and made the platoon commander do it. That was commendable. But the other thing is now there's no 2.5 and 5.0, right? It's all that number system now, which is even more confusing, right? 68 up to 68 is low, and then 100 is well above it's for the police officers, detective for non-investigative track. So I'll tell you, I've been in interviews, and you literally have to convert the numbers
Yeah.
to think about that, right? So yeah, but if you want to continue about that, the 5.0.
No, I'm just saying the conversation that we had was, that if somebody is rated the highest, whatever that is now, whether it's going to be over a 95 or whatever the case may be, where it used to be a 5.0. So whatever equates to a 5.0,
Yes.
or whatever numbers equate to a 2.5, which is a below standards, has to be the rater has to be the CO.
Right.
And there's a couple of different trains of thoughts on that.
I hate it.
Yeah, I know.
I think it's ridiculous. Okay. So here's my example. A sergeant who knows his squad, and he has 5 guys in the squad. He believes that 4 of those 5 are 5.0. He's working with them. Maybe they're given activity. They're addressing every condition. They've getting positive crafts from their grandmothers, right? That's how good they are. And the one guy, he's average. He's a 3.0. Now I have to take these 4 evaluations, skip my platoon commander, and go to my XO or CO, right? I think it's the CO has to go to.
CO, yeah.
Absurd. So you're telling me you were a CO, you were a great CO. When you think, do you want to really deal with that? You want to I have to review? I mean, yeah, that's a bad question, because you'll say, I like to do that. I'm good.
I didn't mind it.
But other people don't want. And what really hurts me is we exert the authority of the lieutenant now, because we go over him. You're going to tell me that my platoon commander doesn't have the necessary skills and capability to evaluate those 5 guys also. Remember, they work in the same platoon. Those 4 guys, yeah, they're 5.0s. There they are. And now I got to give it to the CO. That's a ridiculous order. That just it blows me out of the mind. I don't understand that. Why it has to go up to the CO. Fine, the CO maybe be notified, but make him the rater? Why? What's the sense of that?
I think that is to avoid. I think that is to avoid any type of favoritism. Like, we get the comments all the time. You get the complaint. Oh, my driver's a 5.0. Is your driver really a 5.0? My driver was never a 5.0. And I think my driver was an excellent cop. I think my driver did an excellent job. My driver wasn't a 5.0, didn't check every box to do everything. And part of that was because of the assignment as my
Right.
driver. But you got the good old boy network, So if
You
they go out drinking with the sergeant, after work, they're a 5.0, and the guy that wants to just come to work, mind his business, her business, and go out and do their job is a 3.5 or maybe a 4.0 if they have, if they're out there really being proactive. So, and also on the other side of it is you want to make sure that people aren't giving below standard evaluations to people because it's personal and it's a personality conflict, which I have seen doing. Because as we know, giving somebody a 2 on the rating scale of 1 to 5 in any behavioral dimension, if you give somebody a below standard, you could give them an above standard evaluation. If you give them a below standard, a 2 in any one dimension, that goes on your confidential performance index, your CPI, forever. So there's ramifications for this. So it's very serious, and it's something that you need to really consider. Is this person really below standard? Now, if they're below standard, they're below standard. If they deserve it, they deserve it. But you conducted several interviews, right? So one of the things you're looking at is the CPI.
Yeah.
So if when I was a cop in 1997, I was rated a 2.0 in 2 of my dimensions because I didn't know what I was doing. I was a knucklehead, whatever the case may be. But then the rest of my career was great. You're still going to ask me about those 2.0s in 1997.
Right.
Because it's there. So I think it's important that you make sure and you're maintaining the integrity of the process. And as the CO, it's one of your duties. And it's some crappy duties you got to do. You got to handle the appeals. If somebody doesn't like their evaluation, they're always fun because everybody thinks they're so much greater than they get rated. And you have to I hated dealing with personnel matters. But it's a very necessary evil to maintain order and discipline within the command, to make sure that everybody is on a playing field. But it takes work. It takes work to do it. It takes buy-in by your supervisors to do it. And also, like you said, you have to give them and afford them the opportunity. Now, I was fortunate in the commands that I ran. When I ran the commands, I was never really hurting for personnel, for supervisors. So I was able to say, all right, listen, I tell the platoon commanders when I'd have a platoon commanders meeting, make sure that you're doing the right thing. Make sure you're giving your guys or girls a day to stay in the dorm and bang out these evaluations or do what they got to do so they're done properly. So I was fortunate. I'm not saying that that's the case with everybody, even if they have the personnel, but I'm also saying that I think it's hard to believe in today's NYPD that they have that personnel, because if they got an extra sergeant, what are they doing? They're flying it out somewhere to transit details, to the Bronx Crime Reduction Initiative, to some type of protest, whatever the case may be. So
I'm a big advocate of, though, trust them, but check them. I don't think the CO has to do the evaluation. He can get copies of everything afterwards. And then I wouldn't hold the cops accountable. Maybe the sergeant has a great friendship with one of the cops. Then I would hold the sergeant accountable. How come you were giving this guy a 5.0 and I don't see any activity? I don't see any type.
I'm the reviewing supervisor. I'm not the rater. So the sergeant's gonna do it. And so instead of it going to the lieutenant, it's coming to me. If the lieutenant's doing it for a sergeant, instead of it going to the XO, it's coming to me. You're just reviewing the evaluation and signing off on the evaluation. You're not actually doing the evaluation. You just
you're the reviewer, right?
Right. You're the reviewing supervisor.
So you are putting a comment in there, and you're probably saying, I agree with this individual's assessment of the cop or sergeant or lieutenant, whoever it is. I just don't think it's necessary. I think it's a waste of time.
I used to get a little more personal with my comments.
All right.
I'd always want to personalize the comments to the actual individual. I hated cookie cutter shit.
I'm just saying that you have to trust your supervisors. That's all. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, you have a sergeant, lieutenant before it gets to the captain. So I just think it's important. That's it. That's all. Just and the 2.0, what you spoke about on the CPI. I would suggest that if anybody gets a 2.0, that they fight it or appeal it. I know the appeal process usually doesn't go the way you think it's going to go. It's going to go probably against you. I don't think, when it gets to the captain or the CO who reviews it, and then it goes to the borough if they want to continue an appeal. I've never seen it change. But like you said, that 2.0 is on your career. I mean, if for the rest of your career, it's on your CPI. And I can't tell you how many times doing interviews, trying to get into one of the subunits of SOD, that we would ask, you would have to ask, why is this? Why do you have that? And some of it's explainable, some of it's not.
Yeah.
But some of them would say, I don't even know. I didn't even see that. I just freaking signed off on that. And I just didn't even see that it was that low. So first thing is make sure you read these things, right? They're your evaluations. Take your time, read them. And then if there's a problem with something, do a little pushback, because most supervisors are understandable, and you don't want that on it. The other thing I could say is if you're going for an interview somewhere, it's best to have a progression of upward progression, right? So you don't want to see where, sometimes they'll say, oh, you need a 4.0 average. So that when you have a 4.5, and then you have a 3.5, and then you have a 4.5 again, all right, you get the four average, right? But we would have to ask you, why did you dip? And some of the dips are understandable. You might get a sergeant that's a dick, right? You might have got this guy that just came in, doesn't like you, and like you said, he's just going to do that. And so, just make sure your evaluations kind of rise. But
Yeah.
I mean, I just thought about that point. Now think about that. Another sergeant comes in and gives a lower evaluation, and because it's a 3.5. You would have been forged your whole career. All of a sudden, this guy says, I don't evaluate like that. I want to give you a 3.5. And
Okay,
then,
but now back to your point. Where's the lieutenant?
well,
Where's the lieutenant to put the sergeant in check?
he'll get the evaluation. And that's my point right there, is that he should get the evaluation no matter what. If it's lower, it went from 4 to 3, or it went from 5 or 2, that's the lieutenant. I mean, I just think that's the progression. That's the way I believe it to be. But
You touched,
go ahead.
Yeah, you touched on appeals and the appeal process, and I dealt with appeals as the CO, and I'm sure you dealt with appeals at the borough level when you were in both ESU and SOD. So again, now this is you want an executive perspective. This is the instruction I used to give to my people, and it's really it doesn't follow the guide. The guide is that I'm the sergeant. I do my evaluation of the cop, and then I send it in the computer to the lieutenant, and then the lieutenant looks at it. If the lieutenant disagrees, the lieutenant's supposed to do their own evaluation, stating why they disagree. Again, communication. Just like you should be talking to your cop about their performance as you go along. When you're ready to do your evaluations, I used to tell everybody, listen, when you do your draft of your evaluation for the cops, let the lieutenant take a look at it. It's a lot easier because the process is so convoluted. It's a lot easier for you to have that discussion with the lieutenant and make changes, if appropriate, before submitting it. If you feel strongly and you don't agree with the lieutenant, then submit it and let the lieutenant make their own reassessment. That's the policy, and that's the thing. But I always thought that it was important. Listen, guys, before you send it, have the lieutenant look it over. This way, if there's any issues, you guys can hash it out before we have to start doing extra evaluations, calling down to EMD to take words out and change words and things like that. It's very difficult to do after the fact. So I always like to just, listen, have some conversations beforehand. And then as far as the appeals, don't forget, you can appeal only under certain circumstances. They have to be factually incorrect. They have to be biased of some sort. You can't appeal the comments that the supervisor makes. You can only appeal, the ratings and stuff. So the appeal process is difficult, but they do it. They do it all the time. And I used to laugh. Patrick brought up
Yeah,
a
that's
comment
funny.
before about when he was in the DEA, detective called up bitching and moaning, you got a 3.0, which means meet standards, right? That means you come to work and you do your job. You met standards, right? There's certain standards. You come in, you do your case as a detective, you come in, you do your casework, you get closures, and you move on to the next day. You're not a superstar. You're not out there doing a lot of proactive stuff. You're not thinking outside the box as much as other people. Sometimes maybe. So you meet standards. And he said it was the fairest evaluation that he ever read. The guy didn't have a leg to stand on. And those, I tell you, were the appeals I used to get all the time. People would come to me with a 3.0 or a 3.5 and say, "Hey, I deserve a 4.0. I deserve to be above standard." And I used to say, "Tell me what you do that's above standard. Explain to me. Tell me what you do. What do? You come to work, you do your job. You do the bare minimum. You're not being overly proactive. You're not out there helping the squad. You're not out there apprehended wanted individuals off of intelligence that's given out at roll calls or given out in intelligence packages or now this officer profile report, maybe. I don't know. You come to work. You respond to your 911 jobs. You don't shit can everything. You make a collar when you have to. Maybe you do some enforcement with summonses or oath summonses or whatever the case may be.
Quotas.
Tell me, what do you do? Well, I come to work. That's what I do. I get a collar a quarter. I write my 6 summonses, whatever the number that they produce, to go out there and write the summonses on this unofficial quota, right? But I was very strict with that, though. But there was no numbers in my commands, and anybody in the chat or anybody on social media will come at me and tell me there was numbers that were given out when I was a CO. You're not going to have it. But so that was the funny thing, and there were times where I would look at it and I would say, okay, I think you have a valid point. I would speak to the supervisor a second time, speak to the platoon commander a second time, maybe even speak to another supervisor in the platoon and say, listen, is there a beef with these two? Is there a personality conflict? What do you think of this cop? Not that they're going to do an evaluation for them, but I'm just trying to gather as much information. And I have had evaluations changed. I've had, done 49s to EMD. Some of the comments were factually untrue. And for that, you have to call up and have things deleted or whatever the case may be. So it's not a rubber stamp that it's no. It's not like, the CDs when every time somebody appeals a CD, then it goes up to the borough. It's always double. Whatever the penalty is, it's double because that's the option. So I just wanted to touch on that because you hit appeals.
I hit a little nerve on you.
It's not a nerve. It's just listen. This is one of the things that as a CO that I took very serious because I didn't like it when I was a cop. I was a sergeant, and I didn't think it was fair. I didn't think I was evaluated fairly. I didn't think everybody else was evaluated fairly. Cookie cutter stuff. Sometimes they wouldn't even change things. One time I read my evaluation and it said Officer Perufo, who was my partner, in the comments. The sergeant just cut and paste. It's just so it's one of the things that I always tried to strive to better the conditions for the people that work for me. And things, especially if things that I didn't like when I was coming up, I tried not to replicate those things and to alleviate those stresses on the members. And this evaluation system was always a nightmare. It's always going to be a nightmare. It's almost like department recognition. It's just certain things that just are not equal across the board. And so, fair or favoritism, I think it leads more towards favoritism.
I just want to briefly touch on a captain's evaluations because those are the most tragic things in my opinion. Because
you had some.
So did you. Come on.
I went 5 years without an evaluation as a captain.
Well, we all know, right, that there's supposed to be knowledge, skills, and assessment. You're supposed to be given those knowledge, skills, and assessment at the beginning of the rating period. And then at the end, you will be rated on whether or not you attained those knowledge, skills, and assessments. But we all know what happens, right? What happens is at the end of the rating period, they will call you and say, hey, this is Joe from the borough. I got to do your evaluation, Captain. Fill it out, put in the KSAs, and put in your accomplishments, and then I'm going to sign off on it. So now, this is how captains to deputy chiefs are being treated for their evaluations. So think about that. They don't give a rat's ass about our evaluations, but that's going to filter down. That's like, you know, do I give a rat's ass about everybody's evaluation? No, I do care about every cop and sergeant, lieutenant that works for me. Absolutely. But what do I want to do? I just want to get those shifted over here and sent downtown because I don't want to hear the BS either. So if they don't treat the executives right, how can that filters down? I mean, I thought you would think that they would learn, right? They think they would know this. I mean, it's astonishing that you do that. I mean, only to my last couple of years when I was in the department did I actually really do the KSAs on a certain date prior, and then waited. And I don't know, you kind of it's a year in advance, so the guy could move, the guy could go anywhere. The KSAs change, right? So it's not even really a good evaluation system, but that's what they have in place. So they're treating executives like that. Do you really think they give a care about everybody else? I think it's just a thing that they got to do and push through.
Yeah, I remember Inspector Lenny Sauter, retired. He retired quite a while ago. Was the only borough executive that I ever worked under when I was a precinct, either XO or CO, that actually did our evaluations every year. Every year, Lenny did the evaluations, and otherwise, I remember one time I was submitted for to put an application. I was asked to put an application in for PMI, the Police Management Institute. We both attended.
Right. Yeah.
And part of the package, like anything else, if you want to go away to college, if you want to take one of the scholarships, whatever the case may be, part of the package, like any other package, is you got to put in your last 3 evaluations. I had none. I had no evaluations. I called the borough. Nobody. I had no evaluations done. And like they said, what do they do? All right, Ron, fill it out and send it up and bring it up to me to sign it. I'm doing my own evaluations.
I know. It's ridiculous. Well, I think we burdened that evaluation system pretty good. If you, I just want to. We always like to end right positive, right?
Yep.
And I think I'm just going to throw these things out.
The whole show, but
I just want everybody to remember that your work defines you, right? So what you do as a police officer is incorporated into those evaluations and what you do. And in my opinion, you're just a number, right? You're a tax number. So, and when are you a tax number? When you go into looking for another position, to go into another command, you're just a tax number coming. But your evaluations are written, and that's probably the first assessment that you have on for a supervisor interviewing you. That's the first thing I'm reading is your evaluations. So I just say they're your evaluations. Don't make it the sergeant's doing my evaluations, and then no, they're your evaluations. So everything you do, be proud of the work that you do, and make sure it's put on your evaluations. Make sure you self-craft. Do everything you can to possibly promote yourself to whatever position you want. So all I'm saying is, although the evaluations are skewed and there may be, and we believe they show favoritism, get your evaluation to the point where they can't dispute it, right? Whether it's you craft, your boss crafts, whatever you do, whatever you have to do, if you have to do your summonses in a particular location, your performance indicators, as we say, if you have to do it, do it, because you want to you're the owner of your career, and you and only you can push forward. Like we did in a couple podcasts a while ago, you're going to get people that see that, and that's the people that are going to push you forward. So that's important, right? And I think
Right.
if you just want to, grab that little tidbit, Ron, maybe just speak about,
Yeah.
I like what you say. It's not who you know, it's who knows you. I mean,
Right.
that falls right into that, and those things that you do makes that person want to help you more.
Right. And again, that it's not who you know, it's who knows you is a Joe Fox quote that I carried over. And it's absolutely true. You make your career. I used to talk to the recruits the day they got sworn in when I was a candidate assessment. And I would tell them from the moment you walk through that door this morning, you are making your career. The way you present yourself, the way you handle yourself, your work ethic, what you're going to do. I used to tell them that there's so many things on the job. We talked about that in the prior episode about, how do you prepare yourself and things you can do on your own to get to certain details if that's the desire that you have. That comes from your work ethic. You'll create your own career. Don't let somebody else dictate your career. You dictate your career, just like you said, by what you do, by how you act. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to self-promote yourself, whether it's a positive craft, which again, I understand. I don't necessarily agree because I'm not into self-recognition. I was always big about department recognition. The supervisors are responsible, and I used to make my platoon commanders give me a monthly report and tell me why nobody deserves to be put in for department recognition, if there was any good collars or any good work, because cops should not have to write themselves up for department recognition, right? Same thing. This is what they're doing with craft. They're recognizing themselves. Now, to a point, I can kind of understand because the supervisor can't be everywhere. So they're putting these things in, and it's also up to the it only carries so much weight because the supervisor is supposed to go in and look at these things and verify that they actually happen, that these cops are actually doing what they're self-crafting themselves for, that they're not just saying they did all this stuff, and you're looking at them go, bro, you were in Jamaica that week. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Next thing you know, you're self-crafting yourself for somebody else's job. Oh, I showed up to that job, that robbery collar. That was a great collar. You responded to the 85. You responded to the foot pursuit. You're going to self-craft yourself for a foot pursuit unless you are the one that jumped the fence and tackled the guy and grabbed the guy. Then, maybe, hey, I assisted in a great apprehension. But I'm not big in self-promotion. But I understand that it helps, and you have to do. Like I talked to a few cops this week and asking about that, officer profile report. And again, it came up that cops aren't crafting themselves in a positive manner as much as when it first came out. Like everything else, things go by the wayside. But it is important because it's something. It's something to put yourself out there. You have to promote yourself. You have to make yourself known. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is just show a good work ethic. Come to work, do a good work product, and you will be recognized.
I think what Justin A is saying there, maybe we should get that book, right? He said it reminds me of the book So Good They Can't Ignore You. That's spot on, right? As Eric would say, great
100%.
point. Gentlemen, no matter what, our work exemplifies who we are. Absolutely. Ron,
Great
if you just want
point,
to give some more information about Eric, just so we can maybe close this out now, if you're unless you have any more
Sure.
thoughts.
Yeah, no, I just think, Eric was on earlier. I'm not sure if he's still following with us. I appreciate the support. Appreciate the support from John and Eric. Appreciate the support behind the scenes by Jack, our producer. Does a great job helping us out and guiding us as new podcasters, right? So these guys are all giving us advice and helping us. So here's Eric taking his time to mentor us. Now, again, there we go. I've always said it. I was an executive. You were an executive, both of us for over 20 years, and you never stop learning in anything, and as in life. So as in life with this podcast, they're mentoring us. Now, Eric, what everybody didn't know, again, was going through this fight. For those who weren't on in the very beginning, Eric Dim, who is a podcaster from the New York's finest Retired and Unfiltered podcast, 365 Live, the 0805 0505 on the West Coast for Eric, because that's where he is. Going through a very, very difficult time right now with his son Derek, who's fighting brain cancer. He's got a stage 4 tumor on his brain that's considered inoperable at this time. He was out in Malaysia when they discovered it. They flew back home. They sold their house. They have gone through their 401k. They've been just financially devastated because the coverage is just not what you would think it would be. And it's so expensive. Medical care in this country is so expensive. So they're living in an RV and trying to make the best life for Derek while he's fighting this painful, and it's very painful, the kid's in pain, daily battle. So God bless Eric. God bless his family. God bless Derek. And we, again, I want to give a shout out to Paul Manicone and his wife, who started up a GoFundMe page for Eric. Now you look at that number and you say, "Oh my God, that's a lot of money that's been raised over the last day." So, and it is, but it isn't.
It is, but
It's not. When you're paying $10,000 a month in medications, it's not. That money goes very, very fast.
Yep.
So, and don't forget, that's without including your living expenses. You
Right.
know, so they still have to. So he starts to support his wife and his other child. So, if you could, please, in the description of the show is the link to Eric's GoFundMe, or you can go to any one of our socials. I'm at 110 Big Guy. Rob is at Rob Luke 10. No,
10. Yep.
yes, at Rob Luke 10 on X. I'm also on LinkedIn as well as Rob. Or you can go to Eric's or the Finest Unfiltered. You can go to Paul Manicone's Just Right PD is his handle. Again, we thank them, and we thank you for anything that you can donate. Anything helps. Everything helps. And if you're in a situation of your own where you cannot afford to help and donate to the cause, that's fine. Please just send out your thoughts and your prayers to Eric and his family. So with that, I appreciate everything that you're doing. Appreciate your partnership. I think we got through another show, and we'll see you guys next week. If you have anything else, Rob?
Just a shout out to Eric, like you said earlier. You know, our thoughts and prayers are with us. In my opinion, this is 1013, right? Officer needs help, and Eric needs it. We support him. He has been a great mentor. I truthfully love him like a brother, and let's show our support. You know, that there's a great brotherhood that doesn't end on the end of the 5 boroughs. It goes across the country. So let's all reach out and help Eric and his family. And God bless them. And we'll see you next week at the same time, right? 17:05 on next Wednesday.
5:05 p.m. on the East Coast for you civilians. Don't forget, tomorrow morning, they'll have the weekend roundup with Marlon, Eric, John, and I believe Sal at 08:05 in the morning on the New York's finest, Retired Unfiltered Network. Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.